A comparison between Islam, Christianity, and Judaism and the choice between them. Part 17. Misconceptions that the enemies of Islam falsely attribute to Islam and a brief refutation of it. We have already alluded to the fact that Islam is the religion of truth. And the prophet of Islam is the prophet of truth, and the book that was revealed to him was the undeniably authentic eternal miracle, the Quran, and it is the guide to the straight path. So one should not lend one's ear to the misconceptions that the enemies of Islam falsely attribute to Islam, as it has already been shown that Islam is the undoubted truth. The scholars of Islam have refuted these claims. Nonetheless, one finds the enemies of Islam adamant in their attempts to misguide and hide the truth. They seek to do this by encouraging doubts about Islam in any way they can. They do this in the hope that it may stem the flow of the numbers of people becoming Muslim. Despite their best efforts, it only strengthens the position of Islam irrespective of whichever tactic they deploy. Despite all of their plotting, Allah says about them. 8. They intend to put out the light of Allah, i.e. the religion of Islam, this Quran, and Prophet Muhammad, with their mouths. But Allah will complete his light even though the disbelievers hate it. The Rose, verse 8. We shall refute all of these doubts and misconceptions in this section. They ask attackingly. Why does Islam allow for a man to take twice as much as the women in inheritance? Is this fair and just? Is this not oppression? In answer to this question we say, Islam does indeed give the man a double inheritance compared with to a woman, this if because of the following reasons. A woman is dependent upon her father in her youth, and in the absence of her father or brother takes this responsibility. Then if the women get married, the responsibility and financial burden is on the man, he is the breadwinner. The woman's property remains that of her own. If she wants to spend from it on her children or herself, it is her choice. The woman in Islam is taken care of by her guardian. So even if we find that a woman takes half of that of a man, the half is protected for her, whereas we find the man always burdened with spending on the family. So the half that she is inheriting is an honor for her, especially when she has no obligation on spending it, and that the women pre-Islam didn't inherit anything. Giving the man double the women is absolute justice and fairness as well when you look at it from the perspective of the man. Islam took into consideration the rights and the responsibilities when disseminating its rule. This is a further proof that the teaching of Islam is from a wise Lord. They also ask attackingly, why is the testimony of two women the same as the testimony of one man? Firstly, it is important to clarify that Allah endowed qualities on the man like leadership and so on and so forth that he did not endow on the women, and vice versa. It is well known and accepted by people with a sound mind that the strength of the testimony of a man is stronger than that of a woman. It is not something readily disputed, but if you propose the opposite, it would be hotly disputed. It is well known and accepted that the man is able to discern better than a woman. The proofs for this is the following. First, life man is more likely to face the challenges that face life and its problems because he is the breadwinner and typically has more interaction with the real world than the woman, who is dependent from her youth. So automatically the man's testimony is given preference, as there is a big possibility that he was caught up in the midst of the problem he is testifying to, whilst the women might be far and distant from such circumstances. The proofs for this is the following. First, life man is more likely to face the challenges that face life and its problems because he is the breadwinner and typically has more interaction with the real world than the woman, who is dependent from her youth. So automatically the man's testimony is given preference, as there is a big possibility that he was caught up in the midst of the problem he is testifying to, whilst the women might be far and distant from such circumstances. The most effective place for a woman is the home, where she takes care of her children and organizes the lives of her family. If she does this well, she will find no chance to be outside the house, where she may come across these types of situations where a testimony is required. If the origin in Islam is that a woman remains at home, then we find a man's duty is not complete without having interaction with people in the outside world. People of different life experiences and statuses and different mentalities. So it is automatically more likely that the man is open for these types of experiences because of the nature of life where his testimony may be required. Note, one finds that the learned man and the illiterate are the same in the court of law, as it is what was seen that matters, not how cultured one is. The nature of women is of weakness and frailty, and so she may become frightened and unsure and uncertain, and is in need of someone to reassure her. especially if this occurrence was a serious matter. So Islamic law recognizes the state of women appreciating her role in society and recognizing that sometimes she is in need of affirmation from another witness to reassure her of what she saw. So the ruling is wise from the creator of humans who knows his creation. We also find the accusation that Islam is barbaric and encourages domestic violence and beating women. The question being, how does Islam do this? Islam forbids beating women and warns strictly against it. The Prophet, peace be upon him, never beat any of his wives or servants, as his wife Aisha, may Allah exalt their mention, reported in an authentic tradition, Bukhari number 2328. Women are, in general, weaker than men in their physique and stamina. Women are often unable to defend themselves against violence. Although beating of women is generally forbidden, Islam permits the beating of wives in a restricted and limited sense only as a final solution and acceptable valid reason when all else fails. This is analogous to spanking children when all else fails and they must learn a lesson in obedience for their own protection and success. In the verse quoted, Allah deals with the case of a wife who behaves immorally towards her husband's rights. The treatment of this extremely sensitive issue comes in gradual stages, as we have noticed from the verse. Medicine, or treatment of any ailment, can be very bitter at times. But an ill person will take the remedy gladly and bear the bitterness of the medicine in order to be cured from his illness. The remedy to treat a wife blameworthy of immoral behavior, as we have noticed, comes in 3 gradual stages. First stage, the stage of advice, counseling, and warning against Allah's punishment. A husband must remind his wife of the importance of protecting his rights in Islam. This stage is a very kind and easy one. But, if this treatment does not work and proves to be ineffective, then the husband may resort to the next stage. Second stage, to leave the wife's bed. Or, if one sleeps in the same bed with her, he will turn his back to her, not touch her, talk to her or have intercourse with her. This stage, as noticed, combines both strictness and kindness, although it is a very harsh practice on both. But, if this treatment does not work, then the husband may resort to the final stage of discipline explained below. Third and final stage, beating without hurting, breaking a bone, leaving black or blue marks on the body, and avoiding hitting the face or especially sensitive places at any cost. The purpose of beating her is only to discipline and never retaliation or with desire to hurt by any means. Islam forbids severe beating as punishment. As to those women on whose part you see ill conduct, admonish them, first, next, refuse to share their beds, and last, beat them, lightly, if it is useful. But if they return to obedience, seek not against them means of annoyance. Surely, Allah is most high, most great. The women verse 34. So Islam did not call to barbarism and violence, but allowed a gentle hit to reprimand only after having failed in the previous steps as mentioned. Islam ordained for a woman to show obedience to her husband who more often than not faces many of life's difficulties and stresses. So glory be to Allah for legislating these laws and sending the last of his messengers. We also find the accusation that women are prohibited from wearing the beautiful clothes outside of their houses. Isn't this an infringement of her rights? Firstly, it should be noted that there is nothing called absolute freedom, as if you apply this absolute freedom you will be infringing on someone else's freedoms. For example, one cannot raise the volume of one's radio to the maximum and claim that it is from his freedom. Especially if it is late at night and he is in a residential area with neighbors or he leaves his car in the middle of a public street making the claim of freedom. A human is nothing but a single creation of Allah, and so his actions and interactions should not be determined by his desires but rather by the laws that his Lord governed for him. So the behavior of a woman inside or outside of her house is not according to her head but subjugated by the will and command of Allah. Without doubt we submit to the law of Allah and do not oppose it. Islam prohibited for a woman to dress up or beautify herself from the outside when she leaves her house. This is to ensure her safety and betterment and the greater benefit to the whole society, as will be clarified. We also find the accusation that Islam infringement on the rights of a woman to wear or not wear the hijab. As mentioned previously, the behavior of a woman inside or outside of her house is not according to her head but subject to the will and command of Allah. Islam ordered for women to dress in a hijab when in the presence of non-relatives and outside when she leaves her house. This is to ensure safety and betterment and the greater benefit to the whole society from reducing the number of extramarital affairs that take place because of attraction and one look. Uncovering women causes great deterrent to a society, breaking its family structure and messing with blood ties of people. For example, a man who is married and has been for 15 years can be easily tempted by a woman who looks younger than the man's old wife. It only takes one look at Western society to understand the disintegration. We find that in the practice of hijab is an equal benefits concept, so the man and the women both are protected. We find that the practice of hijab also protects the women from sexual harassment that she would face if she didn't cover herself appropriately. Lifting the moral fabric of the society and building it up on the principles of obedience to Allah to ensure eternal bliss in this life and the next. It should be noted here that the glancing and gazing at women is also prohibited in Islam, and it is upon everyone to protect themselves in this regard. One should keep in mind that after the first glance he may look again, and soon he will find his heart attached to this lady. He may even start to feel aroused, which could lead to the most illicit of acts and falling into the major sins. And so we find that lowering of the gaze is better for the man, the woman, and the entire community. It is important to note that the hijab of a lady is her biggest insurance for herself and her husband, and protects the society from the unspeakable ills that occurs when laws like this one is not applied. So glory be to Allah for legislating for us our sacred law, and for sending to us our Prophet. We also find the accusation that Islam allows for a man to take up to 4 wives simultaneously. It should be noted that the benefits of polygamy are so numerous that it is another sign that this law is divine and sent from God Almighty. For further reading, refer to the book, Polygamy, and the Prophet Muhammad. By Muhammad al-Sayyid Muhammad. To mention but a few of these great benefits that result from the practice of polygamy. Islam with its upright code of practice did not come to eradicate the desires of man and the natural instinct that he was created with, but rather it came to guide and direct it to what is right according to what Allah Almighty revealed and was pleased with for his slaves. 1. It is from the laws of Allah and his wise decree that the numbers of men in comparison to women are always less, and that a man is more exposed to dangers and death than women in all walks of life, especially war. And the 2 world wars are examples of that, leaving millions of women both married and not to lead lives without a husband. And if every man limited himself to marrying just 1 woman, this would leave a large number of women without partners, leaving them no path in satisfying their desires apart from blameworthy ones satisfying their desires like animals satisfy their. And the science of measuring rates of birth and deaths has been a slap in the face of every ignoramus, as they discovered that the numbers of female births far outstrip births of their male counterparts, proving the verse in the Quran. This is a book, the verses whereof are perfected, in every sphere of knowledge, etc., and then explained in detail from one, Allah, who is all-wise and well-acquainted with all things. Quran chapter 11 verse 1. 2. That women are normally reliant. It is with this in mind that in Islam a man is charged with the responsibility of clothing, feeding and housing his wife. This is in addition to her right to a dowry, and it is upon him to fulfill all of her needs. This is all to respect women, in contrast to what we see today with many men fulfilling completely the rights of their wives because of poverty. Therefore the reliance of a woman to her husband is less than the reliance of a man to his wife, as she will not face poverty as he is likely to feel it because of his undertaking of marriage. If a man was to then limit himself to 1 wife, it would mean the increase in the numbers of reliant women who do not have anyone tending to their needs, and would cause great social upheaval and to the spreading of indecent acts between humans. And this is evident in the Christian and Jewish traditions, even to the point where they do illicit thing in the various festivities. 3. Perhaps you find some men blessed with both extraordinary physical strength as well as above-average financial wealth, and like we alluded to earlier, Islam did not come to eradicate the desires of man and the natural instinct that he was created with, but rather it came to guide and direct it to what is right according to what Allah Almighty revealed and was pleased with for his slaves. Rather, Allah Almighty legislated that for men who are like this, that they are allowed to take up to 4 wives, especially as there are periods where women menstruate, or like the postpartum bleeding after childbirth where he cannot approach her sexually. So not only is it a mercy for the man, but it is easier on his wife who may be his only wife and be unable to fulfill all of his needs. 5. There are men who for whatever reason travel between countries for long or short periods of time. It may not always be possible or feasible to accompany his wife on these journeys, especially if he has children. So it was from the mercy of Allah that he allowed for such a man that he take more than 1 wife, so that he can protect his name and honor and not fall into that which Allah prohibited. especially if the country he is visiting is one where sexual vices are prevalent, where the moral fabric of the people is weaker and they may not even believe in a God. Of course, this is also not without conditions. He should ensure he is not absent from the wife he left behind for long periods that may bring harm to her. He should always deal justly between both wives in everything. 6. There are some men who want to see their offspring flourish, from what they have been endowed with by Allah in physical strength and financial stability. Or perhaps they seek to emulate the advice of the Prophet when he said, "Marry the women who are childbearing and make themselves beloved to you." As I am proud of your numbers on the Day of Judgment, he is of course charged with bringing his children up according to the regulations of Islam. Allah did not seek to restrict men who find themselves in the aforementioned categories by limiting them to one wife, but on condition of his ability to make provisions for them, including their religious well-being, by holding tight to the Sharia of Allah. Secondly, that he treat them with absolute justice. This, along with what we have shown, demonstrate that the Prophet's marriage to multiple wives and his allowance for the believers to do so is a definite proof of his prophethood and a confirmation of his message.